In August of 1977, Peggy Hodgson frantically called the London police. She reported that her children were hearing knocking noises coming through the walls of their home and that some of the furniture was beginning to move around on its own. Upon arrival at the home on 284 Green Street, a police constable was invited inside to observe the same phenomena as Peggy and her family. The constable was baffled by the inexplicable wobbling and sliding of the chair in the house. The police continued to return for investigation and witnessed several other odd happenings, including one where Janet, the youngest daughter, was reported to have levitated. Members of the Society for Psychical Research conducted an investigation, determining that there was certainly paranormal activity occurring in the home. This activity included the occurrence of a gruff voice, sometimes spoken through Janet, that announced itself as Bill Wilkins. The strange happenings documented on 284 Green Street are considered today to be the work of an Enfield poltergeist. However, many skeptics have come forward to denounce the notion that paranormal activity ever took place in the home. Janet Hodgson was a notable, precocious child who easily could have been faking the voices entering her body, who often played pranks on her mother and sister, and who even admitted to hoaxing some of the documented activity in her later years. But upon playing the tape of the spirit's voice during an LBC radio broadcast, the investigators and the show's host received a call from a man who claimed that the voice was that of his father's, William Charles Wilkins, the previous owner of the home, who had died in 1963 on a chair in the living room. He often went by Bill. This is Watch Her Cook. Hello, everyone. I'm Cassie.
And I'm Danielle.
Welcome back to Watch Her Cook, a podcast dedicated to sharing the incredible lives of women who have taken their power back throughout history.
And we're getting spooky.
We are. We're getting spiritual today.
I love it. I can't wait.
Danielle's thriving.
I'm thriving. I'm so excited. We're going to have a lot to talk about during this episode, and it's kind of a revolving conversation that we have on National Park After Dark in different ways and through personal experiences and stuff with psychics and mediums, especially on my side of the fence.
For sure.
So there's that. But yeah, I'm stoked to talk about this. So, and we're talking about there's two women in today's episode.
Yes. So let's dive into it. Today, we are going to be discussing two women who were affiliated with the spiritualism movement during the 1920s, Mina Crandon and Rose Mackenberg. Mina, one of America's most celebrated mediums, found herself at the center of controversy when famed escape artist Harry Houdini set out to test her psychic abilities. On the other side of that mission was Rose Mackenberg, Houdini's sharpest undercover investigator, who spent her career slipping into disguises, infiltrating séances, and uncovering the secrets behind the curtain. Their lives reveal just how far belief and deception could go.
Mina Crandon was born in Picton, Ontario, Canada in 1888. Much of her childhood is undocumented. However, it is alleged she grew up on a farm and moved to Boston in her 20s to work as a church secretary. Here, she married a man named Earl Rand, who she had a son with. Shortly into her marriage, Mina experienced abdominal pains consistent with appendicitis. She was admitted to the hospital in Dorchester and met with the surgeon who would be operating on her, Dr. Leroy Goddard Crandon.
Mina returned home from surgery in good health and went on to drive ambulances as a volunteer during World War I, bringing injured or dead civilians to hospitals for care. It was at this time she was reacquainted with Dr. Crandon, and the two began a romantic relationship. In January of 1918, Mina filed for divorce from Earl Rand. Soon after, she married Leroy Goddard Crandon and moved in with him, bringing her son with her. It is here that Mina became known as Mina Crandon.
Surrounded by death, Mina grew increasingly fascinated with mortality. This curiosity led her to explore the practices and claims of spiritualism. Today, we often think of spirituality as a broad belief in something greater than ourselves, not tied to a specific religion. But in the late 1800s, spiritualism referred to the belief that the living could communicate directly with the spirits of the dead. The movement is often traced back to March 31st, 1848, when sisters Kate and Margaret Fox of Hydesville, New York, claimed to contact the ghost of a murdered man. The spirit allegedly spoke through a series of rappings, which were knocks. captivating the public and turning the Fox sisters into America's first celebrity mediums.
This happened during a time of intense religious reform in the United States. For some reformers, particularly those critical of the church's silence on slavery and lack of support for women's rights, the Fox sisters' demonstrations seemed to offer proof that the spirit world was real. Some historians also note that spiritualism thrived in a country where many were intrigued by and sometimes appropriated indigenous traditions that emphasized a spirit realm. This cultural fascination, combined with the reformist intrigue in the era, allowed spiritualism to grow in popularity and eventually allowed it to be monetized through showmanship. Spiritualism became popular again nearly a century later when World War I ended and many grieving parents, widows, and friends were desperate to get closure from those they abruptly lost to the violence.
And we've talked about this kind of extensively on National Park After Dark. And I wish I went back into our catalog and looked at the specific episode numbers, and we'll get into it in talking about kind of like séances at the White House and things like that in this episode. But we did an entire episode on that on National Park After Dark. And that's where we really kind of leaned into the history of spiritualism. But we've talked about it also in regards to, of course, we talked about the Fox sisters who, because we don't really return to them later in this episode, are frauds, of course. And then we also did an episode on particularly kind of the rise of spiritualism, especially in parallel with the Civil War, and how, like you just said, when this war ended, in this case, World War I, and people were just really wanting to connect in any way. They were desperate to connect with those they lost and really leaned into anything that would offer them that connection. And just like kind of the rise and fall and ebb and flow of spiritualism and spiritualism practices in this country is just so fascinating to me, because it's just something that I don't think is ever going to go away. It just takes on different forms.
For sure. And it definitely, we're seeing these heightened points like with World War I when there's extreme trauma happening to a lot of people. And I do think that it's really interesting that so many people lean into this form of spiritualism specifically that we're talking about today.
I mean, hello, it's me. Hi. I
Hi,
have also
it's me.
count myself among these people, and probably was in a previous life as well. And I won't get into like any of my particular experiences, but I have seen more mediums than I can count, especially after the losses of my father and my partner. For that reason, wanting some sort of connection and continued relationship, and just knowing that they're okay and still part of my life, and still kind of seeing what's going on, and like not here, but still somewhere. And we're going to get into kind of like the darker side of mediums in this episode, and not really like the sunshine and rainbow experience that I have had. And I think we want to do this intentionally, because a lot of times we are just talking positively about people's experiences with psychics and mediums, and not all of the bad things that have also come from that.
I've been scammed by a psychic before. I knew I was being scammed.
Oh, yeah. I remember this.
Yeah, it was so dumb. I had the dumbest reading, and I knew I was being scammed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me and my friend walked by a place and it said, "Get your psychic reading here." And we were like, "Great, that sounds cool." And for some reason, I had been I think I had like an interview earlier that day or something. I was like dressed up, and she went hiking that day. So we were dressed completely different. And we walk in, and she was like, "Yeah, we'll do your reading, blah, blah, blah." And we sit down and we did a combined reading. Or no, maybe we did them individually. I don't remember. It was a while ago. But I just remember that she looks at me, and you could just see by the way I was dressed. She didn't tell me like anything about my future or anything like that. She was just like, "Yeah, so I'm getting that you're a type A personality. You really need things in a certain order. You're not spontaneous. You don't like to like go and do really adventurous things. You have a strict schedule." And I was like, I'm literally dressed for an interview right now. That's all you're getting, like, off of this. And then she just kept saying, does that resonate with you? And I was like, yeah.
You're like, I know that left. I don't even want to entertain
I'm like,
this.
You're clearly a fraud. Yeah. Immediately, right off the bat. I was like, you couldn't have described to me worse than, right. Like, or more opposite, I should say. Not worse, but more opposite than what I am.
Yeah. And that's something that we're going to get into with just people kind of playing on visual appearances and different clues and things that people kind of offer up and just really center their entire reading on those things and not really give any other information. And I'm so fortunate that one of my first real experiences with a true medium, I mean, I had been to Teresa Caputo's live shows like several times before this and like seen her work, and I love her, and that's another thing. But this one woman came as a recommendation from my mom's friend from high school. And this was after Ian passed away. And she's like, I'll give you her phone number, or I'll give you her phone number. She can text you, but she's really slow at it. So if she doesn't get back to you right away, that's why, like, don't take it personally. So long story short, this woman, I get in contact with her. She lives in the middle of upstate Maine. She has a cell phone, but it's super basic. She barely knows how to use it. She uses a landline for everything else. She took my name and a phone number, and payment was, I had to send in via a check in the mail because she didn't have any sort of like electronic way to do it. And she gave me my reading over the phone and didn't see me, had no details on me. I didn't give her my first or last name. And she not only connected with my dad and Ian, but she was giving details about things that had happened after their passing that I had told no one else about, or had like just conversations in my head about, or just things in my day-to-day life that I never posted about or made public in any way, or like just things that she would never, ever, ever know.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of on the fence about like psychic readings. I kind of stay away from, because not that I don't believe that certain people have those abilities. I 100% do. However, I don't want to know anything about my future, because then I think it becomes complicated, because it's like, is this a self-fulfilling prophecy because you told me something that's going to happen in the future?
It's like, am I going to do these certain steps because I think that this is what's going to happen?
Right. Like, I don't really want to mess with that. I'm just interested in hearing from dead people. Okay. And so far it's worked out for me. But this episode, again, is not about that. It's kind of about people, a woman, and Houdini is largely involved in this as well.
It's a different side of Houdini that I feel like a lot of people don't really know.
Yeah, he was hellbent on being like, there are a lot of scammers out there. And
he was good reason for it. Yeah.
You know, like at the bottom of this, I think this is a complex argument, and you can see different sides to the argument about this, and that's why it's so interesting. So let's get more into it. We're all chasing something. Step count goals, a promotion, or maybe just a vibe. Let's not let bad socks and blisters ruin it all. Bombas makes socks and now slides and seamless essentials that keep up with whatever you're up to, whether you're running an entire marathon or just a few errands. They have socks that wick sweat, help you keep cool, and fight blisters for whatever you're up to. Running, playing sports, hiking, or just a hot girl walk. And they don't stop at socks. They've got fresh white tees, waterproof slides, which I personally love for camp showers, and buttery soft, sweat-wicking underwear that feels barely there. As someone who travels almost every month, I can personally attest to their compression socks as well, which I always have on hand for flights. But best of all, Bombas isn't just about feeling good. They do good. One purchased equals one donated to someone who needs it. Because I hike so much, it's a must that my socks hold up to the trails, and I get that with Bombas. I also love their underwear because I want to feel as free and comfy as possible when outdoors or lounging on my couch afterwards. And their undies are so soft, they seamlessly go from trail to TV time. Head over to bombas.com and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com, code AUDIO at checkout. Bombas.com and use code AUDIO. With all the cooking and baking shows on TV with all of their fancy ingredients and dishes, it can feel like you have to spend some big bucks and hours in the kitchen to create delicious food in your own home. But think again. You don't need to be a world-class chef, because when you use EveryPlate, you get restaurant-level deliciousness week after week with recipes like crispy buffalo ranch chicken and cheesy Mexican street corn hash. I am not particularly known for my cooking skills, and left to my own devices, I'm not very culinarily creative, but with EveryPlate recipes like chili mayo tempura shrimp rice bowls, I think I can hold my own. Not only are these meals delicious, you'll spend less on these flavor-packed homemade meals than you would on your normal grocery run or at a restaurant. And with their constantly rotating weekly recipes delivered right to your door, say goodbye to cooking the same things over and over and up your dinner game in 30 minutes or less. I love planning. It keeps my mind calm and my life in order, and that goes for planning my meals too. And with EveryPlate, I love choosing my meals ahead of time to know what I'm making each week. So what are you waiting for? Dig into these flavor-packed meals your household will love. New customers can enjoy this special offer of only $1.99 a meal. Go to everyplate.com/podcast and use code WatchHerCook199 to get started. Applied as discount on first box, limited time only. Back to Mina Crandon, she continued her interest in spiritualism by hosting séances in Boston for locals. It was during this time that she gained the stage name Margery. Word spread quickly of Margery's abilities, and she was eventually acquainted with the author of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was an enthusiast of spiritualism and publicly supported her. This endorsement opened up Margery's already growing list of upper-class clientele within Massachusetts. She was often touted as charming and seemed quite disinterested in the monetary gain associated with performing these séances, which only furthered her reputation of being a credible medium.
In 1924, Margery's husband submitted her to a contest in Scientific American magazine, which was aimed to test a medium's ability to produce genuine psychic phenomena under scientifically controlled conditions. The prize was $2,500 for anyone who could make it through the rigorous debunking efforts of the magazine's committee. On this committee, among a well-respected Harvard professor and notable psychical researchers, was Harry Houdini, the world's most famous escape artist and magician. Houdini was now in his late 40s and had performed many world-famous tricks on stage, wowing audiences globally. And while his form of performance was designed for shock factor, he felt that there were many people claiming to have psychic abilities who were fraudulent and merely using them to take advantage of their grief-stricken clients.
Due to his own training in magic, Houdini understood many of the ways that alleged mediums would use trickery to fool their guests into believing that spirits were present. He began attending séances in disguise with a reporter and a police officer to try and debunk mediums while they attempted to contact the dead. After successfully exposing many frauds, Houdini had his sights set on Margery. The contest took months to evaluate, as it involved the committee visiting mediums across the country to observe their séance practices under the controls given to them. While most judges remained cautious, Scientific American associate editor Malcolm Bird was convinced Margery might succeed.
On July 23, 1924, the committee visited Margery's home for an evaluated séance. During the séance, a bell was rung in the room, seemingly by a spiritual visitor, which wowed the group. Houdini, however, accused Margery of extending her foot in the dark to ring the bell as a trick of illusion. Houdini later demonstrated this act to the committee to prove that Margery was a fraud. The committee returned to Margery again in August that year. This time, Houdini brought along a box-like contraption that they would ask her to sit inside. The box would prevent her from being able to move her arms or extend any part of her body to ring the bell that was centered on the table in front of her. When the lights went out and Margery performed the séance, the bell rang. Many were convinced this to be proof of her powers, but Houdini found a break in the box where she had likely managed to fit her arm to ring the bell in the darkness. Houdini, incredibly frustrated by Margery's tricks, began to demonstrate her so-called abilities on stage by replicating the way she had fooled them during the several séances the committee witnessed. He even went so far as to publish a pamphlet outlining the tricks that she would perform. The Scientific American Committee decided not to award the $2,500 prize, concluding that Margery had not conclusively demonstrated genuine psychic powers.
Unfazed by the loss, Margery continued to perform séances in Boston, intensifying her theatrics in elaborate ways. On some occasions, she was reported to have performed in the nude. On others, she would wear glow-in-the-dark stars on her face. She was also allegedly known to have jumped into the laps of men during séances to startle them. It was clear that her performativity and unique approach kept visitors intrigued in her so-called abilities.
Unique approaches.
That's a word for it. And it's just so interesting because, like, you know, we're talking about psychics and mediums and the validity of their abilities and things like that, but not even really, because we're talking about performative arts right now. Like,
yeah,
you know,
you have a grieving widow and she's putting stars on her face and jumping nakedly into the arms of men in like these big theatrical performances.
Yeah. And not that I know too much about her specifically and her tactics outside of this and what a seance entailed. Like, I've never been to a seance. And especially back then, just kind of how they're described and coming across, it doesn't feel like a reading that you or I or anybody would have with a typical medium today. It's not flashy. It's not, there's nothing extra going on. It's information over a phone call or in person. It's not darkness with knocks on the walls and lights flickering and things being thrown around. And like, this is more about the performance of it and just kind of being like, there's a presence here, period. Like, yeah. Okay. And, you know, like anything else. And I know that, you know, maybe that was just kind of as far as it went at the time, but that's what Houdini was like really upset about. You know, it's like you're getting people's hopes up that there are the spirits of their deceased loved ones around by you cracking your knuckles. And I'm looking at you, the Fox sisters, you know, like that's not good. And I understand his whole deal about wanting to expose that side of things because it's predatory. In 1926, the American Society for Psychical Research again investigated Margery after new allegations of trickery. During one seance, Margery placed a narrow rod in the center of the table before her hands were tied. Margery warned guests that touching the rod would disrupt the spirit's ectoplasm she was calling to the room and might endanger her life. For context, ectoplasm was a so-called mysterious living substance that flowed from a medium's body, believed to allow the spirit to take physical form. When the lights went out, oh my God, have you seen pictures like of so-called ectoplasm before?
No, but ew.
It's as
like,
gross
I don't want
as it sounds.
Bodily fluids being seeping from another person in front of me.
It's like there's some photos of, I mean, they're clearly fake, but there's like a medium that's kind of sitting in a chair. They look almost possessed, and there's this like substance flowing out of their open mouth, and their eyes are like rolled back in their head, and it's pretty gross. It's like, I don't want to see that, even though I want to talk to my dead people. Like, you don't need to take physical form like that, please.
Okay, I thought that this was going to be like bodily fluids, but like there's one, and the guy clearly just has like a cloth in his mouth.
Well, we'll get to that. And we're looking at this with 2025 eyes and knowledge, but back then it was quite the scene.
I'm like, that's a napkin. Okay.
When the lights went out, witnesses reported the rod moving side to side, apparently propelled by unseen forces.
Ooh. Robert Williams Wood, a physicist on the Scientific American Committee, suspected that Margery might be manipulating the rod placed at the seance table.
No.
No. I was like, what? During one sitting, he tested the tip of the rod. Some accounts say by touching it, others by gripping it with his teeth to see what it was made out of. When nothing happened to Margery, he later recounted the experience aloud. At that point, Margery reportedly gave a sudden shriek, fainted, and was carried from the room. In the years that followed, new investigations dealt further blows to Margery's reputation. In 1929, during one séance, she produced what she claimed was a spirit hand, but when examined, it turned out to be a piece of carved animal liver. Newspapers pounced on the story, and the liver hand became a sensational symbol of fraud and spiritualism. Margery's ectoplasm also became a target for skeptics. While she insisted it was a living, supernatural substance exuded from her body to allow the spirits to take form, investigators often discovered it was nothing more than a regurgitated cheesecloth, rubber gloves, or other concealed materials, like probably napkins. These exposures, coupled with Houdini's earlier attacks, left her credibility in tatters.
Mina continued to hold séances into the 1930s, but the liver hand incident and other exposures had permanently damaged her reputation. Her wealthy clientele dwindled, and she lived much more privately. In 1941, Mina died in Boston from illnesses related to alcoholism, ending the life of one of America's most infamous mediums. But even as Mina's career faded, Houdini's fight against fraudulent mediums was only growing, and one woman would take that fight to new levels, and her name was Rose Mackenberg.
It's really interesting to me that there are so many instances where Mina is debunked, and it took so long before people were like, no, she's actually fake. I think people really wanted to believe she was real and were holding on to like, oh, maybe she was just faking it that one time. You know, it feels like people really had to bring forth a lot of evidence that she was faking before her career faded.
Yeah, definitely. And it just kind of speaks to the desire that people have and the lengths they'll go to connect with people they love and just holding on any fragment of hope. You know, I
love that people are debunking her, though, because this is not the realm you don't take advantage of people who are in such a fragile state anyway. So I'm glad that someone is jumping up and being like, hey, stop.
Yeah. And Houdini led the charge. He's like, not on my watch. I'm the
like,
only person to trick around here.
Yeah. That's probably what it was, is other people were tricking better than him. And he's like, not on my watch.
There's only one room for one What is it?
There's only room for one trickster
in these parts. And
this town ain't big enough for the two of us. That one.
Yeah. Thank you so much. When it comes to grocery shopping, each and every time I struggle with one thing consistently, and that's finding the time. With a schedule that always seems to be filled, getting to the store to shop is harder than it seems. But luckily, my time has been freed up with Hungryroot, the easiest way to eat healthy. When you use Hungryroot, it's like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist. Just tell them about your goals and your preferences, and they fill your cart with personalized recommendations. I love eating healthy and I do my best to find food that is clean, but one of my favorite things about Hungryroot is there's no high fructose corn syrup, artificial sweeteners, or preservatives in any of Hungryroot's food, and they only source top quality meat and seafood, free of hormones and antibiotics. They have healthy groceries like smoothies, kid snacks, sweets, ready-to-eat meals, salad kits, and even supplements. And when it's time to get cooking, they have over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, and most of them can be made in 15 minutes or less. Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free. You're going to love Hungryroot as much as I do. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/watchhercook and use code watchhercook. That's hungryroot.com/watchhercook. Code watchhercook to get 40% off of your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/watchhercook. Code watchhercook.
You know how some dogs will eat literally anything you drop on the floor? Yeah, my dog is the complete opposite. He's the pickiest eater I've ever met. I can put down a bowl of food and he'll just give me this look like, Nice try. But then I tried Ollie and it was like night and day. And suddenly, mealtimes are his favorite part of the day. Ollie delivers clean, fresh nutrition made with real human-grade ingredients, no fillers, no preservatives, just actual food. And they've got 5 amazing flavors, like fresh beef with sweet potatoes and fresh turkey with blueberries. Even my super picky pup can't resist. And the difference? He's happier, more energetic, his coat is shinier, and yes, his poops are better too. And they make it super easy to get started. Just take a quick quiz about your dog, and Ollie builds a personalized meal plan. Your first box comes with 2 weeks of meals, a storage container, and a simple guide to ease the transition. Dogs deserve the best, and that means fresh, healthy food. Head to ollie.com/watchhercook. Tell them all about your dog and use code WATCHHERCOOK to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's ollie.com/watchhercook and enter code WATCHHERCOOK to get 60% off your first box.
While getting into Rose Mackenberg was born on July 10th, 1892 in Brooklyn, New York. Like Mina and many other women at this time, much of her early life is undocumented. However, in her teenage years, Rose began working as a stenographer in a law office. A stenographer is somebody who records spoken words quickly and transcribes them using shorthand. Eventually, her curiosity from hearing the ongoings of cases in the law office led her to begin working as a private investigator. In the early 1920s, Rose worked on a case for a banker who had made investments based on the advice of a local psychic. The man claimed that the investments he made were causing him much financial hardship, and he believed that the psychic was a fake. At the time, Rose was a believer in spiritualism. Due to a mutual connection, Rose was able to get in contact with Harry Houdini, whose debunking efforts had become known to her. Houdini agreed to help with the case and, impressed by Rose's charisma and logical reasoning, decided that she would be a great fit for his own investigative team. Eventually, in 1925, Houdini offered Rose a job and noted her current beliefs on spiritualism, telling her, quote, "If you want to find a real medium, you're in the best position to do so."
When Houdini had a scheduled performance, the investigative team would arrive at the destination days prior, source local mediums, and ask to have séances with them for a deceased relative who never actually existed. The team would wear disguises and use false names, experiencing the séance with critical eyes, observing the many ways that the medium would attempt to perform for them. They would take notes and pass them on to Houdini, who would call out the medium as a fraud and reveal all of their tricks to his audience. Due to Rose's charm, Houdini would often invite her up onto stage with him to corroborate his claims, where she would recount the experience she had while undercover. This caused a tense atmosphere at times, and Houdini was sometimes criticized for his intent to expose people, believing his ego preceded his desire to do good. As a result, it was alleged that Houdini would harm himself with a pistol during these shows, asking Rose to do the same, but she refused to do so.
Houdini's reputation as a debunker began to frustrate many psychics and mediums throughout America. He received a letter from a preacher in Indianapolis by the name of Charles Gonzales, who originally preached sermons in defense of the KKK, making statements like, "Christ was the first Klansman." The preacher had since left the Klan and moved on to spiritualistic practices, and in his letter wrote to Houdini threatening to expose his tricks to the public. In response, Houdini asked Rose to investigate Gonzales in disguise. Upon her arrival to Gonzales' home in Indianapolis, Rose disguised herself as a grieving mother who had just lost her infant child. Gonzales offered to perform a séance for her, but suggested that, in order to best communicate with the spirit world, she should be naked for the duration of the ceremony.
Ew.
Like, come on.
Why are we trying to take advantage of a woman who you think is at her most vulnerable point?
Just lost her infant child. You're like,
and
you know
want
what?
Her to get naked
would help with that if I could see her boobs. Like,
it's like,
what?
Get away from me.
God. Well, Rose refused to take off her clothes, claiming to not understand why it was pertinent. Gonzales went ahead with the séance anyway and claimed to be speaking to the spirits of her deceased husband and recently deceased child, who were, of course, non-existent. At the next Indianapolis show, Rose joined Houdini on stage and they called Gonzalez out on his fraudulent behavior. The preacher struggled to defend himself and excused himself from the remainder of the show. Rose has been documented as describing Gonzalez as an oily man.
I like that description. Oily man is just the equivalent of a gross, nasty man.
Yeah.
It's an oily man.
It gets to the point. It really conveys what she's trying to say pretty well.
It truly does. Unfortunately, and unsurprisingly, this trend of using seances to take sexual advantage of grief-stricken women was something Rose commonly encountered. She reported that several so-called mediums attempted to touch her under their tables and would grab her arms and body parts without consent during seances.
It's like, it's not just that guy.
Yeah, I can't say I'm surprised because men are historically atrocious. Not all men, but not all men, but men. And it just, yeah.
And again, it's just like going on with just capitalizing on vulnerability, just being like, what can I get away with? Like, how much can I get away with here? Not just taking your money and tricking you
but how can I assault you?
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I bet that this fueled Rose's fire to be like, I'm exactly where I need to be because these are people who are taking advantage of women at their most vulnerable. And she's in a position to be like, I'm going to out you.
Yeah. Publicly. Shame you.
Like, I'm not the one to mess with. And you're about to find that out. Due to her growing notoriety as Houdini's chief investigator, Rose's disguises became more elaborate. In the places she visited, she would stop off at a department store and observe the behaviors of the local women, including their fashion and shopping habits, to inform herself on how to blend in with the locals. Her character portfolio was seemingly endless, as she would portray a vamp from the countryside or a credulous servant girl or even a tipsy consultant. She would also name herself in clever ways, adopting names like Frances Rod, which would shorten to F-Rod or Fraud, and Alicia Bunk, which sounded like all is a bunk when spoken slowly. So she's very clever. It was also very common for Rose to play a grieving widow. In an interview with the St. Louis Dispatch, she stated, quote, "I never married, but I have received messages from 1,000 husbands and twice as many children in the world to come. Invariably, they told me they were happy where they were, which was not entirely flattering to me."
I kind of love that.
Yeah. It's like, I've never been married or had kids, but I've had 1,000 ghosts come through and spirits come through and say that they're happy.
Yeah, they're doing well.
She also became ordained many times by spiritualist churches where she appeared in disguise, often for a fee. This designation gave her the nickname the Rev in Houdini's investigation team.
Perhaps her most important role came in 1926 when Congress considered outlawing fortune-telling in Washington. Houdini attended several hearings as an expert witness, constantly discrediting the psychics and mediums who defended themselves and their practice. Oftentimes, he would use information gathered from Rose's investigations to prove these people were not who they claimed to be. Rose eventually took the stand as well, recounting her experience with Jane Coates, a medium working in Washington who had confessed to one of Rose's disguises that she had 4 active senators as her clients and that even President Coolidge was having seances performed at the White House. Coates immediately denied these claims, and the hearings went into an uproar, causing it to be adjourned until a later date. The legislation was never passed.
News of President Coolidge's alleged spiritualism began to pop up throughout the press, and Houdini eventually wrote an apology letter to the White House. Coolidge's team never made an official statement regarding the accusations. Rose's testimonies against several mediums during the hearings were also well reported, and skepticism around spiritualism began to take root throughout the country. It became clear to Rose, and now was becoming clear to many Americans, that the intangible nature of spiritual evidence allowed many people to be taken advantage of in their time of need.
Well, I love how it's like the White House never gave an official statement. It's like, because they were doing it.
It's like, because that was true.
Yeah. And it's been true before. And again, I did a whole episode on seances held in the White House, and we really honed in on the Lincolns because Mary Todd Lincoln was huge into this, especially after the death, not only of her husband, but she had some children die, and she was big into it. And there were literal seance rooms in the White House. So it's not a rumor. Like, they have done it, and many presidential families have partook in seances and had spiritual advisors and made a lot of decisions. But for good or bad, I'm not here to say, but they did entrust decision making, and they had psychics and mediums come and be like, is now a good, and astrologers come and be like, is now a good time to do this, or what are your thoughts? And leaders of this nation have done that repeatedly. So
yeah, they're like, are we compatible? I'm a Gemini and they're a Libra.
Yeah, yes or no. But yeah, so I just think it's just funny that the legislation was never passed, right? Because they wanted to continue doing it.
Right.
I'm sure they have a stake in this. They have a horse in this race, as they say.
As one would say. Well, Harry Houdini died on Halloween of 1926 from a swollen abdomen. Throughout his career, Houdini would encourage people to punch him in the stomach, claiming that with proper stance, he could take a hit without repercussions. While this often proved to be true, he performed this same trick in a social circumstance in Montreal, inviting a woman named Jocelyn Whitehead to deal him a blow. He abruptly asked her to stop after repeated hits and spent the next 10 days ignoring a surging fever and abdominal pain before winding up in a hospital in Detroit with a ruptured appendix. This is where he passed away. Shocked by his sudden death, Rose decided to continue in Houdini's footsteps throughout the 1930s and debunk more fraudulent mediums. She proved just as successful on her own, revealing many more scams and schemes as she went on.
In one such instance, in the 1930s, Rose visited Pastor Herman E. Parker, disguising herself as a widow, using onions on her eyes to make her tears more authentic. Noticing the state of her tattered clothing, Parker charged her only $1 for the seance, where he made contact with another one of her non-existent husbands. Suspecting Parker of scamming clients for money, Rose baited him by asking the spirit of her husband what she should do with the thousands of dollars he had left her. Parker perked up, believing he had misjudged the woman by her clothing, and advised her to invest $1,000 with the Wilcox Transportation Company. Rose wrote Wilcox a $25 check, which she eventually used as a receipt when bringing the case to local authorities. Rose unveiled a common scam peddled by alleged mediums, and Herman E. Parker and John F. Wilcox were tried for fraud and sentenced to prison.
I think it's a pretty hard and fast rule that if the spirits are telling you to donate money and someone else is telling you that, then it's probably a scam.
Yeah. Anything to do with money
is a scam.
Is a
the
no.
Spirits don't care about money.
Yeah. You can't take it with you. They don't care.
Yeah.
I've never been advised. I've never been financially advised by the other side. And that's great.
That is great. Success. During her time as an independent investigator, Rose became touted as an expert in psychic fraud. Like Houdini, she quickly understood the basic book of tricks that many mediums would follow and was able to spot them with a keen eye. Of her own observational skills, Rose has said, quote, "I smell a rat before I smell the incense." She was also outspoken about the ethics of mediums choosing their clientele carefully, noting that the lesser talents would take advantage of desperate, uneducated, and unprotected poor folks who were easy clientele to fool. She was quoted as saying, "The most vicious criminals in America are the charlatans who betray and plunder their heartsick victims in the name of their dear departed dead." In order to ensure that everyone was educated on these matters, Rose toured the country giving lectures on psychic fraud, where she would demonstrate many of the common tricks used, just as she did on stage with Houdini at the start of her career. She also cautioned her attendees that grief-stricken times would cause a resurgence in the psychic business, noting that, quote, "The anguish of friends and relatives of dead soldiers offers a fertile field for deception."
And she's not wrong. After nearly 40 years of debunking frauds, Rose Mackenberg passed away on April 10th of 1968. During her life, she performed thousands of investigations and was never caught or questioned once while in disguise, always managing to get the evidence she needed. While they were both still alive, Harry Houdini had given Rose Mackenberg a code that, should she make successful contact with him from beyond the grave, would verify that spiritualism was indeed real. Prior to her death, Rose claims that the code never came through.
Despite what she saw and experienced, Rose said that she was still open to believing in spiritualism, or that there were ways to possibly come into contact with those who had passed on, but she just hadn't seen any evidence of it in her lifetime. Her knowledge and skepticism allowed Rose to uncover many scams that took advantage of vulnerable people, yet she remained agnostic in her beliefs. While it seemed like she usually enjoyed her experiences of dressing up and catching a fraud, her bravery and determination to seek the truth has made a large impact on the way we view spiritualism today.
And I love the code thing because I remember reading a book about this for research for National Park After Dark, and I totally forget the name of it. It's on our website, but it's about kind of just like the history of spiritualism and seances and stuff like that in the United States in particular. And there's a section, of course, on Houdini because clearly he played a large role in this. And the code was and I didn't know that he shared it with Rose either, because in the context I remember, it was he shared it with his wife, who I think her name was Bess, because I think they had come to the understanding that like she would probably try and contact him after he died. But the code was Rosabelle Believe. Isn't that interesting?
That is really interesting.
Like, why is it Rosabelle? Is it because of Rose? Yeah, I don't know. So it's, I'm sure the answer is out there. I just don't really remember.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I really liked this episode and talking about these two women in particular, because it really, when you boil it down, it doesn't have to do with like believing or not believing in an afterlife, really, even though it does have that veneer. It's really about like being a con artist and wanting to expose con artists.
Definitely. And exposing people who are taking advantage of a vulnerable population. And I think there's this argument that could be made of how are they doing any harm? You know, you have these people who are providing comfort for grieving people. And it's like, I think that there could be this argument of if they believe it and it's making them feel better and it's not going to change their circumstance, but they feel better, like what's the harm that they're truly doing? And I don't believe that argument. I just think that it's one that could be made. And I think that for me, the answer is that it's actually detrimental, because it's like, it's a placebo effect of trying to make someone feel better, but you're not actually doing anything, and you're lying and you're deceiving. And it's not right, especially in a world where there are people who are true mediums, to create this fraudulent space that is undermining someone with actual abilities to take advantage of people. And that's where it becomes wrong.
Yeah, totally. And I think that it's not as prevalent today because we've become more aware of these tactics, and it's harder to fool people now.
Yeah, you can't put a cloth in your mouth anymore and
just call
it's
it ectoplasm.
It's like, no, I just ate food with that like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's like that was on my lap at dinner. Yeah, so I think it's a combination of things, and I think it's harder nowadays to fool people with anything. I mean, it's just we're becoming more keen to deceptive tactics, and which is good. I mean, it's great, and it kind of clears the aisle a little bit for people, like you said, with real abilities and unique talents to share with people who want to walk down that path and, you know, dabble with that instead of just being totally taken advantage of, not only lied to and all that, but, you know, in a lot of cases, losing a lot of money.
Well, there's that aspect too, where people are using sometimes very poor people are using every penny that they have to get this feeling of that they're connecting with their loved ones, and they're not.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to Watch Her Cook.
If you're looking to dive a little deeper, we've dropped some sources for you in the description. Let us know what incredible women's stories you'd like to hear next.
And a big shout out to Sick Bird Productions, who produces our podcast and helps bring these stories to life. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Watch Her Cook Podcast, leave a review, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Just a reminder, empowered women empower the world. Now let's go cook. See you next Wednesday.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.